So this deck tech that I'm about to go over with all of you is part of my submission for the Content Creators Cup, which is a Magic the Gathering online contest, which involves myself and a few other content creators, and we're all going to be playing 1v1 Commander against each other. And there's going to be some content creators that you all probably know or enjoy, like Chaz from the MTG Goldfish podcast, Rogue Deck Builder, who's called me out and I'm totally going to crush him, Orcs Head Magic, Nita Hone, Magic with Zuby, Samuel Rubin, a Twitch streamer that you might know, and Total MTG. So yeah, it's going to be a bunch of fun. It's going to be hosted over on the Card Bazaar and They Said We Said's channel. They're both really cool dudes. I highly suggest subscribing to them. You're going to be able to see the games that I play on their channels. I think on the Card Bazaar, they're just going to be showing the promos and stuff, or I think it's the other way around. On They Said We Said's channel, they're going to be showing the promos, and on the Card Bazaar's channel, they're going to be showing the games. So be sure to subscribe to them, check out their content. They're both really good content creators, and they're both friends of mine. So yeah, go ahead and support them, and I hope you enjoy the games that come out of it, because I'm sure it's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. Hey everyone, so you probably noticed that this format's a bit different than normal, and that's because, well, if I wanted to do a normal deck tech video like I normally do, it would take about 4 times the work, just because it's just so many more cards than a normal constructed deck would have. And I needed to get this out today by Friday, so we're just going to go with this. And we're going to be taking a look at Thassa, God of the Sea. So originally, I was playing a lot of Arcanus, the Omnipotent, if I can find him. There he is. He was my original commander for the longest time in 1v1, but because of the introduction of the new 1v1 format for Magic the Gathering Online, came with it the bannings of like Soul Ring, Sensei's Divining Top, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault. All the fast mana that essentially made Arcanus the Omnipotent playable got banned. So I had to change commanders. I love the dude. I've been playing him since 2014, but we got to move on to new frontiers. And oh boy, Thassa is super good. Let me tell you about this card. So she's a 5/5 indestructible beater. You can already read and see what she does. She's really good. We are playing a devotion-based deck. We only run like 12 spells and a lot of creatures and a lot of enchantments, just like ways to turn on Thassa. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first pile here. I've divided it into separate piles for what each card is supposed to do. So Vortex Elemental here will start us off. And this pile here, this 10, is my interactive pile. So they're either creatures that like remove stuff off the board or counter things. And Vortex Elemental does that. It's a dinky little 0/1 OL, but it has that tuck effect where we can shuffle stuff away, or we can attack and force to mass tuck a whole bunch of stuff. And the same can be said here for Voidstalker, but it's a bit worse because we do have to wait a full turn, and it costs 1 mana more, and it just requires more mana to get the same thing that Vortex Elemental would. But Vortex Elemental is worse in its own right for its own reasons, but they both essentially fit the same role. Temporal Adept here has double devotion, and we can return permanents to the owner's hand. We can like get this going on turn 4 and just start bouncing lands and lock our opponent out of playing lands. That's always fun. And next card we have here is Void Mage Prodigy. So this card here, along with all these other cards up here, they all counter spells in some way or another. And Void Mage Prodigy here, the old Kai Buddha special, I think it's Kai Buddha. Anyways, you have to sacrifice a wizard. And we have a bunch of wizards in here. I think we have in total, I want to say between 9 to 12 wizards. So we don't just have to sacrifice the Void Mage Prodigy, but he also adds double devotion, so that's not bad. Our next card here is Daring Apprentice. It's like Void Mage Prodigy, except we have to sacrifice the apprentice itself, and yeah, it has double devotion, dinky little 1/1 body. The only reason why it's in here is because, well, the devotion and being able to counter stuff, because I would be playing more counter spells in the deck if I wasn't playing like such a devotion heavy theme. Then a card like this just gets played over counterspells just because it's a body on the board. And Kira Great Glass Spinner here provides as another form of protection for all of my creatures. I mean, that's really good, but it's also really good with Thassa just because it makes stuff harder to deal with Thassa. It's just another form of protection just because Thassa is already an enchantment, so you know, when it's never a creature, you can't remove it, but when it is a creature, it is indestructible, and Kira helps out with maintaining Thassa on the board. Our next card here is Urtai Wizard Adept. This card is super decent. I totally forgot about it until somebody played it against me, and then they just repeatedly countered everything that I had just because I couldn't deal with it on the first turn, and they just left up 4 mana. So a good little counterspell on demand on a Devotion body. Our next creature here is Venser Shaper Savant. So while it's not a counterspell per se, it's more or less a tempo-y card. We can like bounce permanents, we can bounce like planeswalkers when they're about to ultimate, or any fun shenanigans like that. We could even bounce our own stuff if we really wanted to. Next card here is Glen Alondra Archmage. So Glen Alondra here has Persist. We can just keep sacrificing it to counter target non-creature spell. It's pretty decent in this deck. And then our final creature in the interactive slot is Duplicant. While it doesn't counter stuff, it is another form of removal, much like Vortex Elemental, Voidstalker, and Temporal Adept would be. But it just exiles it whenever we cast it. So yeah, it does get that little like bonus of power and toughness or whatever, but the main thing is just being able to exile something on a creature. So this next pile here is just cards that generate card advantage or draw cards in some way or another. And we'll begin with Jace's Archivist. So it has that double blue for its devotion, 2/2, whatever, but it has that ability, I think it's Windfall. Y'all can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's Windfall, whatever his ability is. So it's a really decent source of being able to draw cards, especially if our opponent manages to draw more cards than we do. We can use this to catch ourselves back up. So for Jeshin Thief here, if it's going to show it. Oh, what just happened to Jeshin Thief? Uh-oh. That was weird. Oh no, I'm losing all my cards. Alright, so you saw Thieving Magpie and Jeshin Thief. They're the same thing as Ophidian here. They draw us cards whenever they deal combat damage. Thieving Magpie has double blue in its casting cost, and it has flying, so it's just better than Ophidian and Jeshin Thief would be. I gotta go find those cards now. I need to put them back in here. Sorry, this is gonna be a bit unprofessional, but whatever. So Jeshin Thief, there we go. Add you back to the deck and put you back here in the pile. And then what was the other card? Thieving Magpie, I think. Magpie. So yeah, Thieving Magpie here is a flyer, has double devotion. They all draw us cards. Pretty decent. So our next creature here is Thassa Del Inquisitor. Well, it has Island Walk, and a lot of players do play islands, so I mean, it will be able to get through for damage, but whenever it connects with an opponent, we can just start stealing artifacts out of their board. If they don't have any artifacts, whatever, I guess it's just a waste of a card, but I found this card to be pretty decent in terms of card advantage because it just gains us like some ramp stuff, so it's pretty decent. Our next creature here is Prognostic Sphinx. So double blue in its devotion, it's got flying, a 3/5 beater, pretty decent, but we can just scry 3 off of it. We can also give it hexproof on demand. It's pretty decent in terms of it just being an efficient beater in this deck. Our next creature, Arcanus the Omnipotent, not good enough to be the general anymore, but hey, you know what, he recalls for us. He has triple devotion, a decent sized body, and he can protect himself, so he definitely goes in the deck. Next creature is Consecrated Sphinx, and the Sphinx here is just a card advantage machine. We just need it to stay on the board until our opponent's next draw step in order for us to draw cards, unlike Arcanus would, where we would need to wait a full turn to turn it on. Consecrated Sphinx can just start drawing us cards pretty much immediately, and it's also a nice, decent sized body in the air. So for our next pile of creatures here, they're just creatures that do different things. They don't really fit a theme. And our first creature here is Wake Thrasher. So it's a beater that we can make unblockable with Thassa here, and we just untap on our step, just like untap 7 or 8 permanents, make this a big beefy dude, make him unblockable, and just kill our opponents that way. Next creature here is Chasm Skulker. So as long as we can keep drawing cards, this dude just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and when he dies, we just go wide. We just get a bunch of 1/1s with Island Walk. I will cast this on turn 3 more than I will on Thassa, just because I want to gain that advantage of being able to get creatures out of it, like like, I'm pretty sure they're gonna kill this card, right? Like, you can't let something like this live as long as it just keeps perpetually growing, especially if I have a source of unblockability in Thassa, God of the Sea, so they have to kill it as soon as possible. So we want to get this guy down early, let him get as big as he possibly can, and do all sorts of fun stuff. So our next two creatures here, Phyrexian Metamorph and Stunt Double, same thing, they clone stuff, except Stunt Double here has Flash, and Phyrexian Metamorph, we can pay life, and it can also copy artifacts, so, you know, we can copy any of our ramp or our equipment, or anything that they may have that we want. So for our final creature in the deck is Teferi, Mage of Zhalfir, however you pronounce it. Triple Devotion in his casting cost, 3/4 body, pretty decent with Flash, and pretty much locks our opponent down to sorcery speed, so that's a-okay, especially in a blue deck, and especially considering that we don't have that many instant speed answers, being able to lock our opponent down to sorcery speed helps us out significantly. So for this next pile here, we have the enchantments and a couple planeswalkers, but they all are the same. They're just permanents with blue in their casting cost, which adds to devotion. So our first card here is Imprison in the Moon. Imprison in the Moon is really good against other commander strategies, against other decks that focus on their commanders, much like I am with Thassa here. You just slap it on their commander, and unless they have enchantment removal, that pretty much locks them out. You can also throw it on a planeswalker when it's about to ultimate, or any other threat that may be dealing with you, like a land. I don't know, if a creeping tar pit is about to kill you, you can just put that on it too and it'll save you. For our next card here, we have a Rhystic Study. So Rhystic Study here is our most taxing card in the deck in terms of taxing our opponent. They either have to pay mana or we get to draw cards, and I'm pretty sure they don't want us to draw cards, so most of the time they will pay mana. But in the early turns of the game, if we can get this down turn 3, more than likely turn 4, turn 5, and turn 6 we're going to be drawing cards. So investing 3 mana for at least like 2 cards is a decent return, and it also adds devotion, so it's pretty decent in this deck. Next card here is Monastery Siege. Monastery Siege, while its cons ability is nice and all, if we have an empty hand, then we're essentially just throwing cards in our bin. And I mean, don't get me wrong, looting is great and all, but I'd much rather have those cards on the board than in the graveyard. So a lot of the times I'll just choose dragons, so that way, you know, it just makes it harder for them to target any of our beaters or Thassa or any of our enchantments that we have. Monastery Siege helps out with that a lot, and also protects us from like getting domed in the face or thought seized or whatever. So most of the time I'll just choose dragons over cons. Propaganda here is a nice little pillow fort card, same with Dissipation Field, but Propaganda here, they just have to pay into us whenever they want to attack, whereas Dissipation Field here, if damage is dealt to us from a permanent that they own, it just goes back to their hand. So I mean, yeah, it can backfire if they have really good ETB effects, but if we're playing against a very aggro deck like Zurgo Bellstriker or whatever, Dissipation Field helps out significantly just because it slows them down in terms of like them having to recast stuff, and it also gives us an opportunity to counter stuff or whatever. Dissipation Field helps out with that. So for these next two cards here, Bident of Thassa, Coastal Piracy, they're both the same thing. They add double devotion. They let us draw cards whenever a creature connects with damage, but Bident has it's a little bit worse just because it's an artifact, so it dies to artifact removal, but it can also force all of our opponent's creatures to attack us, so that way we can crack back and draw a bunch of cards. So you take and you get, or that's not correct, whatever, you know, it has its weaknesses, but it has its strengths. I don't know what that was earlier. Anyways, next card here, Leyline of Anticipation. We can begin the game with it on the field, but it just gives all of our stuff flash. I also did have Vidalcan Ore in here, but while the consistency is nice of having that effect, I just prioritize having devotion more, and there was just better artifacts that I could be using, so we're just going with Leyline here. So Control Magic, Corrupted Conscience, and Volition Reigns, they all do the same thing pretty much. Control Magic just grabs a creature, adds devotion for us. Corrupted Conscience also grabs a creature, but it also gives it infect, and we can also just slap it on one of our own creatures like Thassa, for example, or Wake Thrasher, and we can give it infect and make it unblockable and just kill them in like 1 or 2 swings. And then Volition Reigns here, we can like slap it on a creature if we want, but I'll probably be like taking an enchantment that I may want, or like if they have a Nev's Disc, I take control of it before they have a turn to crack it, or if they have a Planeswalker they're about to ultimate, you know, I get to ultimate it instead. That's always really fun. And our last enchantment, I should say, here is Future Sight. So this card is so good, like really good. Like I really wanted to jam more like 5 and 6 casting cost cards in this deck, but I just realized that 1v1 Commander is not necessarily aggro heavy, but like there definitely are more aggro decks in the field, and I can't be playing too many expensive things like Future Sight and Volition Reigns. And you know what, whatever, I'm a hypocrite, or I'm just bad at building decks, whatever. Future Sight's really good. It adds triple devotion to our deck, and it allows us to just play stuff. You know, we can scry away a land with Thassa, draw into a Vidalcan Shackles, for example, and have a land on top and be able to play the land thanks to Future Sight. So it's very good. For our 2 Planeswalkers here, we have Tezzeret the Seeker and Tamiyo the Moon Sage. So Tezzeret here, we can tutor up artifacts, we can untap some of our stuff like Thought Vessel and Mind Stone, but most of the time he's just going to be tutoring up like Shackles or Jit or whatever. And then Tamiyo here, my most favorite Planeswalker and Commander of all time, I should say. Probably second place is Ugin, third place is Karn, but Tamiyo here is just so good. You normally don't want to be playing her on a board full of creatures because she'll just die unless they're all tapped out, and you can just pretty much neg her to draw a whole bunch of stuff. Her +1 is really good. You know, you just tap down really broken lands or a big creature that they're about to kill you with, or like, I don't know, Oblivion Stone or whatever, and then whenever you get to ultimate, you just essentially win the game. You have infinite card advantage at that point. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's pretty much what that ultimate feels like. So for this next pile here, we have all of our artifacts. We'll begin with Pithy Needle. Pithy Needle is really good against any generals like Thassa, for example, that have certain activated abilities. You know, you just play it and you just name whatever threat that you want to name and hope that they don't have a way to remove it. I really hope that if I play this, they don't, like, I don't know, Phyrexian Metamorph my Pithy Needle and name Thassa. That'd be pretty fucking bad. So for our next 3 cards here, Mind Stone, Thought Vessel, Sapphire Medallion, they're all my mana rocks in this deck. I originally did have some mana rocks, then I went to no mana rocks, and then I went back up to 3 just because I'd rather have some than none. So Sapphire Medallion here just makes stuff cheaper. Thought Vessel here is a reliquary tower essentially, and Mind Stone here provides us a source of card draw if we need it. So Smuggler's Copter here, we are playing a bunch of creatures with 1 power, so they are able to crew Smuggler's Copter, and I'd much rather have a 3/3 flyer that loots rather than a, I don't know, what's a good example here, the 1/3 prowess that can't really get through, and whenever it deals combat damage, draw a card. Why not just put it in the Smuggler's Copter and have our cake and eat it as well? So for our next card here, Sword of the Animist, it's pretty decent in a deck that's just full of basic lands here, because Sword of the Animist, we don't even need to connect with damage, it just needs to attack, much like Smuggler's Copter would, but we just grab basic lands, and it's just another source of ramp in our deck, and I prioritize this over another mana rock, just because it gets to keep the lands on board, as opposed to if they were to wipe all the artifacts off the board, then I'm just kind of fucked, whereas, you know, the only thing I need to worry about in that situation is Armageddon, and hey, that's what these counter spells here are for. So for our next card here, Lightning Greaves. Lightning Greaves gives our stuff haste and shroud, and it's really good not just here with Thassa, but like all of our other tapped cards like Voidstalker, Temporal Adept, Daring Apprentice, and Arcanus the Omnipotent, and Jace's Archivist. So it's very synergistic with other creatures in our deck and not just Thassa. And our next equipment here is Umezawa's Jit. So Jit here is the best Planeswalker you've never played. I should say the best Planeswalker is Deathrite Shaman, but Umezawa's Jit comes in a very close second It's really good with our plan, since we can make our stuff unblockable. We can just use that -1/-1 ability on Jit to kill like smaller generals, because I know people are trying to play their generals early on in the game, much like Zergo Bellstriker or Jace Varen's Prodigy, so Jit helps us take care of that significantly. It can also gain us some incidental life, or we can just use it to pump our Thassa and make it unblockable and kill our opponents that way. And so Sword of Feast and Famine here is our last equipment in the deck, and this card is also another good target to throw on Thassa or any other creature, because we want to be keeping our lands untapped anyways, and Sword of Feast and Famine helps out with that significantly. And it also, like, being able to make our opponents pitch a card is definitely not a bad thing either. So for our last artifact in here, we have Vedalken Shackles. So the Shackles here, I really like this card, but I've been taking it in and out of this deck. I just decided to keep it in because there's been more times where I've liked using this card more than I haven't. And I mean, we are playing a mono blue deck, so we'll be able to gain control of virtually anything save for like an Emrakul or an Eldrazi Titan or whatever. But Vedalken Shackles will pretty much help us keep ourselves alive from any threat, and we can just use their creatures. So for our next pile here, we have our 4 counter spells, and I know we are only playing 4 counter spells, but I mean, we do have a whole bunch of counterspell creatures here, so that kind of makes up for it. I mean, we are playing the classic counterspell, so you know, at least we're not playing bad ones like Cancel. But we are playing some other bulk counterspells like Overwhelming Denial and Last Word, but they are pretty good because they just can't be countered, and Overwhelming Denial here has that surge mechanic in addition to it, so it's counterspell rate. It's really nice being able to cast this on something knowing that your opponent has a counterspell in hand, and then they just get blown the fuck out by like bulk rares. It's pretty fun. And then we have Desertion here as our last counter spell, so you know, counters everything under the sun, but if we grab an artifact or creature with it, then we gain control of it. And you know, it's a sorcery, or it's an instant I should say, so it's not an enchantment, so they don't have to blow up the enchantment and get their permanent back. We just keep it. So yeah, this card is pretty decent. So for our last pile of spells here, we just have spells that do different things, and well, of course they do different things, but for the first 3 spells here, Pongify, Rapid Hybridization, and Reality Shift, they're forms of creature removal. Pongify and Rapid Hybridization do the same thing. They replace a creature with a 3/3 green creature, whereas Reality Shift replaces it with a manifested card. So there is that drawback. You know, we could have just given them like a Vorinclex on the board or whatever that they just need to morph. But more than likely it'll just be like a land or a spell or anything else that they can't turn on. So, you know, trading their huge threat for a 2/2 is more than likely a good thing most of the time. Our next spell here is Cyclonic Rift. We can use this to just incidentally bounce a permanent if we need to, but most of the time we're going to be using it for that overload cost. We're going to use it at the end of our opponent's turn right before their discard phase to bounce everything back and make them discard a bunch of cards. Or, you know, we do it whenever we're about to swing in, we just bounce their entire board and then swing for lethal. Or if they're swinging for lethal, we can bounce their entire hand back. So it's a very, very flexible card, and I've wanted it to be banned in Commander for a while, but I don't know. If it stays in the format, it stays in the format, whatever. Good card is good. So for our next spell here, Rite of Replication. It's another clone effect, much like what's the other clones in the deck? Phyrexian Metamorph and Stunt Double, but we get that added benefit of being able to kick it if we need to, provided we have enough mana late enough in the game, and that can be a win con essentially. We just put that on, I don't know, Wake Thrasher seems like a good target for Rite of Replication, or any other big beefy crap that they have. Or if they have like an Acidic Slime, we can just kick it, make 5 Acidic Slimes, blow up 5 of their lands, and lock them out of resources. That also seems pretty decent. So we have Fabricate here. It's just another tutor target, much like Tezzeret the Seeker would be. We just use it to grab any of the artifacts that we may need. Mystical Tutor here. There isn't that many targets, so we're more than likely just looking for something like Overwhelming Denial. That's a line I usually like to go for. Bribery is another good target. Cyclonic Rift, Rite of Replication. There's a few answers, but Mystical Tutor is just a good way to find them. And then Bribery here, we just use it grab our opponent's best creature. We really hope that they're playing Emrakul or Blightsteel Colossus. If not, if we're playing against creatureless control decks, then we're just fucked, but otherwise this is a pretty decent card. So moving on to our non-basic lands here, we begin with Reliquary Tower. Woo, no maximum hand size, boring. And next, 2 cards, Strip Mine and Ghost Quarter. They both destroy lands like Cabal Coffers or Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, for example, anything that's busted. But Ghost Quarter, we have that added benefit of being able to use it to sacrifice or use it to destroy any of our non-basic lands to help us get an island. There's been a few times where I've had to do that, so it does have that added flexibility. So I mean, like, Strip Mine is great and all, but I want to say Ghost Quarter is just kind of better because, yeah, you do get to deny your opponent's resources with Strip Mine, but with Ghost Quarter, you have that added benefit of being able to help yourself out if you really need it. So Academy Ruins here, we use it to get back any artifacts that we may have incidentally lost. If they blow up our Pithy Needle, we can just get it back with Academy Ruins. Easy enough. And our last basic land, non-basic land here is Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. Like I said before, we're running a very devotion heavy deck, so being able to net a bunch of mana off of Nykthos is gonna be pretty easy to do, and it's not showing up on the pane again. I'm guessing that it's gonna disappear. Ah, there we go. So yeah, Nykthos is pretty decent in this deck. It's our form of Cabal Coffers, essentially. That's like the 30th time I've referenced that card. And we have 35 basic lands, totaling in 40 lands total, and a few mana rocks, and our curve is relatively low. I think we only have around 10 cards in total that cost more than 4 mana in this deck. So our curve is pretty decent. Most of our stuff is in the 3 and 4 drop slot. So, and I mean, look, it's the Dick Island. You can see that shaft, that very suggestive art. You got to have it if you're playing mono blue. It's much better if you're playing mono blue counterspells, then that land really shines. But regardless, mono blue, you got to play with Dick Islands. So yeah, this is the deck. Let me know what you all think. Do you think it's jank? I've been playing around with it a lot for the past, I don't know, week or so, and just been changing things and stuff, and I'm pretty happy with it. My record so far is, before I did the last change, was 11-2, and then I played Kevin from Rogue Deck Builder and I got smashed, so I decided to change some things up. And after I changed that, now my record with the deck is, if I'm not mistaken correctly, it's 14-3. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 14-3. So it's not too bad. I want it. I don't know if there's any other things that I would change in here. There probably is other stuff that I just completely overlooked that just outclass the cards in here. If there are, let me know, because I want to make this deck as good as I can. Even if I don't win this Content Creators Cup, you know, I do have this pretty sweet deck that's a lot of fun to play. So yeah, remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Anyways, I'm Tasty Snackies. You all have been wonderful, and I'll catch you on the flip side.